history's most shocking robberies aren't remembered just for the money, but for the moment everyone in charge seemed to blink at the same time. These crimes didn't win through explosions or Hollywood luck, but because systems assumed they were too smart to fail. One happened during a war where the vaults were practically unguarded, another embarrassed a nation that trusted its routines, and the last outsmarted a high-tech society with nothing but timing and planning. No chaos, no panic, just opportunity. Different decades, different methods, same mistake. When control slips for even a moment, someone is always ready to collect. The Central Bank of Iraq robbery, 2003. In April 2003, as Baghdad descended into chaos following the US-led invasion of Iraq, one of the largest cash thefts in modern history unfolded almost invisibly, enabled by the complete collapse of state authority. Just days before coalition forces reached the capital, a handwritten note believed to be signed by Saddam Hussein was delivered to officials at the Central Bank of Iraq, ordering the release of vast sums of cash to his son Qusay Hussein, and over the course of a single night, approximately $920 million were quietly removed from the vaults and loaded onto trucks without resistance, alarms, or confrontation. What makes this robbery extraordinary is that it did not look like a crime at all. It wore the disguise of official business at a moment when authority still existed on paper, but had already vanished in reality. There were no armed gangs storming the building, no dramatic escapes, just clerks following orders while the state around them collapsed. In the weeks that followed, American forces recovered roughly $650 million hidden behind palace walls and false panels, stacked neatly as if waiting for a future that never came. Hundreds of millions more were never recovered, dissolving into a war-torn landscape already drowning in looting, unemployment, and fear. The missing money represented far more than cash. It was stolen time, lost stability, and delayed recovery for a country already pushed to the edge. This robbery became a symbol of how power can cannibalize itself in its final moments. War did not just destroy buildings in Iraq, it emptied institutions from the inside out. And when the dust settled, it was ordinary citizens who paid the price for decisions made quietly in the dark. The Great Train Robbery, United Kingdom. On August 8, 1963, Britain awoke to the uncomfortable realization that its carefully polished image of order, discipline, and institutional strength had been spectacularly embarrassed by a group of criminals who understood the system better than those guarding it. A gang of 15 men stopped a Royal Mail train traveling from Glasgow to London by manipulating railway signals near Bridego Bridge in Buckinghamshire, overpowering the crew, detaching the mail carriage, and escaping with $2.6 million in cash, an astronomical sum at the time, worth many tens of millions today. The robbery was carried out with remarkable calm and efficiency, involving minimal violence and relying heavily on insider knowledge, precise timing, and the dangerous assumption that Britain's rail network was too predictable to be seriously exploited. Almost overnight, the crime captured the nation's imagination, dominating newspaper headlines and turning figures such as Ronnie Biggs into infamous household names, blurring the line between criminal notoriety and celebrity. For a brief moment, the robbers were portrayed less as villains and more as symbols of rebellion against a rigid system. That illusion collapsed quickly as the gang's discipline unraveled, with careless behavior, internal betrayals, and advancing forensic techniques leading to the arrest of most members within months. The courts responded with exceptionally severe sentences, reflecting not only the scale of the crime, but the state's determination to restore authority and deterrence. The robbery exposed uncomfortable weaknesses in British policing and railway security that could no longer be ignored. In response, security procedures were overhauled, intelligence coordination improved, and complacency was replaced with vigilance. The Great Train Robbery endures in history not because it succeeded, but because it proved that even the most orderly societies can be shaken when routine replaces caution and criminals learn where the blind spots lie. The Stockholm helicopter robbery, 2009. In the early hours of September 23, 2009, one of the most cinematic robberies in modern history unfolded in Stockholm, shattering the comforting belief that advanced, well-organized societies are immune to bold, spectacular crime. A helicopter suddenly appeared above a cash depot in the Vistberga industrial district, carrying masked men who landed calmly on the roof, broke into the building and escaped with roughly 39 million Swedish kroner, about $5 million US at the time, while stunned police officers watched from the ground, unable to deploy their own helicopters because explosives placed near a police aviation hangar earlier that morning had grounded aerial response units. The robbery was not impulsive or chaotic. It was the result of months of surveillance, rehearsal, and planning so precise that the criminals anticipated police communication delays and procedural bottlenecks before the alarm was even raised. What made the heist so unsettling was its confidence, as the robbers moved with the assurance of people who knew the system better than those guarding it. Although the amount stolen was modest compared to historic mega-heists, the psychological impact was enormous, forcing Sweden, long seen as one of the world's safest countries, to confront the reality of highly strategic organized crime. The robbery felt less like a crime spree and more like a carefully executed demonstration of institutional blind spots. Most of the perpetrators were eventually identified and convicted, but by then, the damage was done. Security agencies across Europe rethought rooftop defenses, aerial response strategies, and counter-surveillance measures, recognizing that crime in the modern era doesn't just break rules, it studies them patiently. What these robberies reveal about power, timing, and systemic weakness. Despite occurring across different continents and decades, these three robberies reveal a shared reality. The most successful crimes emerge not from brute strength, but from moments when systems fail or become predictable. In Iraq, war erased accountability and turned state authority into a tool for theft. In Britain, outdated infrastructure met modern coordination. And in Sweden, precision planning exploited procedural rigidity. Each event forced institutional change, but only after damage had already been done, proving that prevention almost always lags behind innovation, especially when criminals adapt faster than institutions. What makes these crimes so unsettling is how ordinary the failure looks in hindsight, as if the warning signs were always there but comfortably ignored. Trust in financial, transportation, and security systems can vanish overnight, not with explosions, but with quiet efficiency. The money matters, but the psychological shock lasts longer because it exposes how thin the illusion of control really is. These robberies remind us that power is not just about authority, but about attention, timing, and discipline. When routines replace vigilance, systems become invitations rather than barriers. And history shows that someone is always watching, waiting for the exact moment when order relaxes its grip. Why these robberies still matter today. These robberies are not just historical curiosities or crime stories frozen in time. They continue to matter because the conditions that enabled them still exist in modern systems, only disguised behind newer technology and stronger branding. Governments, financial institutions, and security agencies often assume that complexity equals safety. Yet history repeatedly shows that complexity can just as easily create blind spots. The Iraq robbery warns how quickly authority collapses under crisis. The train robbery shows how routine breeds vulnerability. And the helicopter heist proves that even advanced systems can be mapped, studied, and exploited. In a world increasingly dependent on automation, centralized infrastructure, and predictable protocols, these crimes feel less like relics of the past and more like rehearsals for future failures. They remind us that security is not a fixed achievement but a moving target, and that systems remain safe only as long as people question them relentlessly. Once vigilance turns into assumption, protection turns into performance. And as long as institutions believe they are untouchable, someone, somewhere, will be planning the moment they are not. These stories aren't just about stolen money. They're warnings about what happens when systems get comfortable and stop paying attention. If this breakdown of power, timing, and human error made you see the world a little differently, you're exactly the kind of person this channel is for. If you want to be smarter every day, like and subscribe.